So, hello, Tracy. It's lovely to meet you in person. We met on LinkedIn, and yes, just so different when you actually see someone face to face and you can have a conversation. And the reason
No kidding.
yeah, I know. The reason I stalked you on LinkedIn is because you've been posting some beautiful posts across Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn on bullying. And they're not your standard posts, so they kind of stood out to me. There's a lot of conversations about bullying, but not many people offer the depth that you're obviously going into. So I thought, conversation, you can tell me all about your journey, you know, what you're doing, and yeah, let's just talk bullying.
Okay, sounds good. So yes, my posts, I don't apologize for them. They're real and they're raw, and I also post about mental illness and suicide in children, and you cannot post mental illness, suicide without bringing bullying into that context as well. Bullycide is becoming quite an epidemic as well. And I pull no punches because I figure if people like facts. We want facts. We don't want fake news. We want actual facts. And I find that when you actually give people the actual stats, the facts, the numbers, the consequences of bullying, and I also choose some very harrowing pictures that accompany it, it really hits them right in the head, but it hits them in the heart as well. And it gets them thinking. And I've had many people say how much they dislike my posts because it really bothers them, but they also want me to keep posting because they need to read it. And it's hard because, as you know, on LinkedIn, there's a like button, but it's not really a post that you want to like, because you actually want to cry and just shake your head with sheer frustration. But I feel that sometimes it's the Brit in me. I think it's the transparency and the let's not beat around the bush and sugarcoat things. This is fact. That's why, if you recall, I did a post about bullying in New Zealand. And I had it ready to go. And then, of course, sadly, the Christchurch massacre happened. And I thought, okay, that would be a little inappropriate just to kind of zing that in. So I had to wait for what I felt was an appropriate length of time to then say, I pay my respects, and that is, I feel so badly, but let's not forget what's going on with our kids as well.
And our workplaces.
And our workplaces, because the reason why I'm on this journey, why it really began, was I was subject to workplace bullying for 4.5 years. And I'd never ever, you always work with a boss that everyone's like, don't want to work with that person again. But I'd never actually experienced the threats and the intimidation and the harassment and the constant on you all the time. If it wasn't text, it was emails. If it wasn't emails, it was phone calls. It was calling you into the office. It was holding you accountable to anything and everything because they just wanted to pick on you. And for the first couple of years, it really bothered me, but I really enjoyed my job and I was very good at it. And at the time, I was also still married, and so I kind of had another person to bounce things off. And then when my marriage fell apart and I ended up moving into my own place and then getting divorced, I kind of threw myself into work. And I think at that point, that's when they have an inherent sense, right? They know that your Achilles heel is now even more apparent, and you're very vulnerable because you've gone through some crises in your life. And even though I never even discussed it with anyone at work, those in an upper management knew, and my bully was in upper management and used it to her benefit, for want of a better word, and just kind of cranked it up. And that was it. 2014, it really came to a head. And then after I actually challenged her over a legal and ethical patient issue where she was in the wrong. And I absolutely could not let it happen because it was going to put other people in danger. And I made her accountable, but unfortunately that was it. That was my demise.
Yeah.
Because even though I succeeded, it made her look very bad.
Yeah.
And she decided that it was time for, put the bullseye up on the wall. Tracey's face is going to be there, and I'm going to sling anything and everything I can. And that's what she did. And it culminated on August 20th with a meeting where I had my union representatives present, including higher-ups from another city I'd called in because I had a feeling it was not going to go well. She'd called the meeting for an entirely different purpose. It was what had happened was, as everything was going down, in the June of 2015, with absolutely no reason, no warning, she called me into the office on a Friday afternoon and told me, "Don't come to work on Monday. I'm sending you to work in another office. You're going to be doing special project work, and you're going to be there for 6 to 8 weeks. I'll decide when you return." That was it. I wasn't able to say, finish my work, say goodbye to, I looked after 23 nurses. When I came into work at the new place on the Monday morning, she had cut me off email, so I was no longer privy to any emails. She had told everyone in the hospital not to communicate with me. And I was literally, in Britain, there's a saying, sent to Coventry, where you're completely isolated. I was put in an office with no windows, one door away from everybody else, and I didn't see a living soul. And I contacted the union and said, "This is unacceptable." They didn't even tell me what the project was. When they gave me the project, I finished it in 3 days. And I said, "Okay, send me back." And they wouldn't even meet me. And so the union took it even higher than her. And when he found out what had happened, he was appalled and said, "This isn't going to happen. She's going back." And so the meeting was called on the pretext of preparing me to return to her workforce. And I said to everyone, no. This is going to be the creme de la creme. This is going to be it. And yes, it was. Oh my goodness. It was absolutely horrendous and so bad that I fell down the rabbit hole. I left work. I was in a state of shock. I was crying. I threw myself into bed because it was like the end of the world. It was totally hopeless. And when I woke up the next morning, I thought I'd had a stroke because I literally couldn't move. And when I did manage to kind of get myself to the edge of the bed, I couldn't lift my arms or my head. I felt like I'd been encased in cement, and not even realizing that, of course, I just had like a nervous breakdown. I was in a major depression. As a nurse, didn't even get that because of the physical effects. I was crawling, and then on the Saturday was my first suicide attempt, and that's when I realized I was in deep doo-doo, for want of a better word. Went to see my doctor on the Monday, and she said, "Oh, Tracey, you've had a massive acute depression. Like, this is it. It's like you have fractured your brain into a gazillion pieces." And it felt like I was in the rabbit hole. That's the only way I could describe it. And so began my journey. And it took me a year to even get to a place where I felt that there was a future, a hope. And that's when I started my blog. My psychologist suggested I start a blog because people, when they saw me, I would always make sure that I looked okay. That's the face of depression, right? You look appropriate and you're dressed okay, and you're not walking around going, "Woe is me." It's that I'm okay kind of thing. And, I'd have people saying, "Well, you can't be depressed. You don't look depressed." Or, "I'm faking it. Prove to me you got depression," Or it's a mild version, because usually if you have depression, you're not allowed to go out in public. And I'm just listening to all these incredible things people said to me, which doesn't help you. And so my psychologist said, put it in a blog. invite some people that you really want to read it. So of course they were nursing colleagues and doctors and psychologists and social workers. And he said, just open up your heart and just tell it like it is. And took me a while, took me a couple of weeks, because I thought, do I really want to be that exposed? Do I really want to tell them that I have attempted suicide on more than one occasion, and you know that it's a battle every day not to die? And when I finally did the first blog post, I got an overwhelming response like, oh my God, you need to put this in a book. We didn't even realize this is how bad depression can be.
Yeah.
And every blog post after that, it was the same thing. You need to, you know, doctors are saying, we knew about depression, but we didn't know about depression. You know, we didn't really understand. And because they knew me and they had worked with me, here was this multitasking, organized, very capable nurse who was all of a sudden was just like dull. You know, I couldn't even do 3 things in a row. I couldn't do 2, you know, and to see what happened to me kind of opened their eyes to, this is depression.
Yeah.
And so finally, after 6 months, found an editor and a publisher who I said, is this book worthy? Be honest. And she read it, and she called, like 3 hours later, she said, I've got you an editor. Do your book. And so that was it. The book was officially released April last year. And it's about the reality of depression and suicide, but it's also what workplace bullying does to you. And as I journal my my experiences from the moment I fell down the rabbit hole until I got to the point where I felt, okay, I'm out, in that I'm on parole, because you never truly escape depression. But you're able to cope much better. But even throughout it all, my employer and disability, the constant harassment from them was like, even though they weren't supposed to, they continued, and it just didn't let up. And it was like, how, you know, where do people turn? What do they do? And you hear every day of people killing themselves, and I totally get it. And even though my focus has changed more to children because of what I encountered shortly after the book was released, I was invited to go to a school and talk to teenagers, and it was actually about writing a book and trying to explain to them how to express themselves using, you know, like imagery of a volcano to try and express their emotions and things. But it was never about the book. It was about, they needed to know about depression and mental illness and bullying, and what did I do to help and to get out of the rabbit hole. And when I was invited 2 weeks later to go to their all-day human library, it was 30-minute sessions where all the kids in the school, so it was 11 to 15-year-olds, would sign up beforehand to sit at different tables. And it was like kind of like a career day, and you could sit at the table. And so they wanted me there as author, how to write and publish a book. And the first group of students sat down at 8:30, and I started talking about writing a book. And, you know, kids, they're all like nudging and looking at one another. And I'm like, you seem confused. You know, you're sitting at my table, right? And they go, yes. And I said, well, can I ask you, why did you sign up to sit at my table? And finally, one girl, you know, plucked up the courage and said, we heard about you. You're the lady that escaped the rabbit hole. We need to talk to you. And so it began. Every 30 minutes was a table full of teenagers who wanted to talk about depression and suicide and bipolar and anxiety and bullying and cutting. And you know, after each session, I had them whisper in my ear, like a 15-year-old girl pulled up her sleeve and showed me all the cut-ins that she'd done, and then told me that she had just come home from hospital after her second suicide attempt. 15 years old. 15. And then at the end of the day, there was a boy, and I noticed him immediately. He did not participate in the table talk, but you could see he was getting very emotional. And at the end, as I was getting ready for the next group to come in, he came up and he was extremely uncomfortable and shy, and he was stammering. And he said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Of course, what's wrong?" And he literally fell into my shoulder, sobbing his eyes out, and said, "I've been in the rabbit hole for 7 years. When will I escape?" And he was 13 years old. 13 years old. And I walked him off to a private area, and I said, "Talk to me." And he just started talking. And as it unraveled, and he was telling me what's going on, and Mum is an awesome support. She's a great support, which is really good. And I said, "You know, let me walk you to the school counselor," because she was kind of prowling back and forth alongside me. And another teacher was kind of behind me, eavesdropping. And he said, "No, I want to talk to you because you've been in the rabbit hole." And we spoke for about 30 minutes. And at the end, as he started to calm down, and I said, "Okay, here's my number. Get Mum to call me if she wants to talk, about what happened. And here's my website." And I said, "There's lots of good info, and you can contact me on there if I said, if any time you ever want to talk." And then he said, "But how?" He says, how do you do it every day?" Because I told him, even for me, some days it's a real struggle. And I said, "Even as horrible as your day is today, something good happened to you." And he says, "No, it didn't. Nothing good ever happens to me." And I said, "Of course it did. Mum brought you to school, and did she say love you?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "That was good." And he said, "Oh, I guess it was." And I said, "Think of something else good." And he goes, "There's nothing." And I said, "Are you kidding me? You got this cute woman in her 50s sitting with you with her arm around you." I said, "Come on, you got this hot old lady sitting with you. That's something good that happened today." And he laughed and laughed and laughed. And I said, "Think of good things. Good things could be that you went outside and you felt the sun on your face, or you and Mum went to McDonald's and you just had a really nice time and the burger tasted awesome." I said, "That's your good." I said, "Think differently what good things are." I said, "You go home and your favorite show's on." And I said, that's the little things. And I said, "My book's in the library. Why don't you go and sign it out right now?" And I said, "When you start going through my book, you can see how the little things become the important things to help you."
Wow.
And it was funny. So I went back in to give the next class meeting. And then at the end of the day, I was packing up to go, and the counselor came and actually reprimanded me. She was like the ultimate bully. And she told me it was none of my business, and I had no business talking to him. And that, quote unquote, "He has so many problems, he's a lost cause, you're wasting his time. You're wasting your time." 13 years old. And this was the school counselor. And I looked at her, and I mean, as somebody that had been bullied for so many years, it's still raw when you have another bully come up. And I said, who do you think you are? How dare you talk to me like that, to start with? And secondly, no wonder he didn't want to see you. I said, "You've already decided he's a lost cause. Shame on you." And at that exact moment, he walked by the library doors. School had finished. He was walking outside to go meet his mum. He stopped, he saw me, he jumped up and down, waving his arms with a big smile, and he shouted, "Thank you." And I looked at her and I said, "Lost cause, hey? Well, there you go." And I picked up my things and I walked away. And it's like, so, and I knew, so how I can imagine how the kids feel. And that's why I decided to become their advocate, their voice, because no one is standing up and actually shouting for them, because they may shout, but everyone goes, oh, it's a kid, it's right, going through a stage, being difficult, hormones, attention seeking. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Sit there. I mean, at the end of that day, I had 63 teenagers come and confide in me what they were going through. 63.
In one school.
In one school. And I stopped my heart driving home, and I thought, no, this is just this school. And then when I started doing my research, I'm like, are you kidding me? This is school. This is every school, and not just in Canada or in the States. This is globally.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, okay, we've got a problem here. And that's how my mission changed from kind of the focus on adults, although I still obviously talk about it. You have to, because even if you're an adult being bullied and you have children, there's a filter effect to them. I mean, kids pick up on things.
Yeah.
But also, if you're bullied at school and you never really dealt with it, you are more susceptible to then being bullied in adulthood as well, and or even then becoming a bully, depending on how hard the experience was. But it's like we have an epidemic of bullying and of mental illness and suicide, and it's not just in children, it's everybody. I mean, and male suicide especially around the world, over 35s, males, is the highest they've ever seen it, and teenagers and kids are coming up close behind. And it's like, we've got to stop this.
We're doing something very, very wrong, aren't we?
We're doing something very, very wrong. And I think what people are not understanding is it's a society problem. It's a whole culture issue. And like, we can't just point fingers and say to parents, deal with your kids. And we can't point fingers at schools. Yes, everyone has a responsibility, but it's bigger than that. It's our whole philosophy on, like, so many people still don't even think bullying is an issue.
No, I'm totally with you on that. Totally.
Right. And if we have people that are saying bullying is a rite of passage when you're in school, how on earth are they even going to understand the implications of bullying in the workplace when you're an adult?
They don't. They just see it as normalized management.
Right? And it isn't.
No, of course.
Intimidation and threats and constant under your thumb, grinding you down so you can exert power and control is a bully.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. And it may have been acceptable in the 1950s and the 1960s, but guess what? Today it's not. And people, I mean, you know, it's so frustrating, because I was the only one that took a stand against my bully, and actually went so far as to file legal grievances, and I was the only person ever to do that. And of course that didn't help my cause, because they just gunned for me even more. But ultimately I was the 8th victim.
Yep.
And even after I filed everything, she then had 4 more victims, and it was the 12th one that resulted in her demise.
Well, at least there was a demise, because often there's not.
Exactly. But think of the 12 or the 11 people beforehand that she crushed.
Yeah. Systematically, deliberately, and with malicious intent. And it's intent. That's the thing, what people are not getting at. It's not a personality flaw. Everyone has an off day. You know, you can have a boss that may be going through a crisis and may seem a little off, but it's when it's constant, day in, day out, and they pick on you all the time. And people in the workplace, anyone who may be listening to this, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, yeah, that sounds like Joe, they always seem to pick on Joe, then shame on you if you're letting Joe being picked on. Because
right? And I'm saying this in schools, be an upstander, not a bystander.
Yeah.
Because they've proven if other kids step up and say to the bully or bullies, that is wrong, and they help the person being bullied, more often than not, the bullying ends.
Yeah. And
Because
yet
they
what
know.
we often see is the reverse of that. No one stands up, and then actually the bully creates a group and a crowd
Yes.
that joins
Yes.
them.
Exactly. And it's shame. And in the workplace, again, you know, if they're picking on one person and yet there's 8 of you in that particular office or in that particular work group, 8 of you standing with that one person is the stronger force to go to upper management and deal with that person than you all going, well, I don't want to rattle the cage, so I'm going to support Joe in secret, but I'll still schmooze the manager, because that's what they did to me.
Yeah,
right?
and it's commonplace because they're frightened for themselves and their own position, and that the focus might turn to them to become.
Exactly. Yeah. But think, and this is, and I so get that, but having now lived it and survived it, it's like they don't realize that they actually own the power.
Yeah.
If you stand collectively as a group and say, what you're doing to Joe is wrong and it's not acceptable.
But they do know that just by doing that, they put themselves offside to the bully, the manager, and that even the most basic of civilities will disappear. They won't get their leave when they ask for it. They won't get their professional development. They won't get put on projects. They will get left off. I mean, your story, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It's just, unfortunately, it's not uncommon. I've heard it time and time again, and I relate to so much of it. But what struck me was when you said you were taken off emails and shut away in an office, isolated. And it is the most vicious form of psychological bullying that there is. And yet, the one that people will say, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't even talk to her.
But you did, and that's it.
But that's, I think, what people fear. If I stand up, even if they don't think they'll be aggressively bullied, they think they will be cut off, cut out, excluded, shamed, whatever. And so the bully is very, very clever in building that fear culture that means they have that absolute power, and they will favoritize people who work with them, stand up for them, laugh with them, whatever.
Yes, and no, and I 100% agree. And I know. I mean, even though, as I said, betrayal is hard. It's very hard when people because I always had their backs, always. And I've always been told throughout my life, your greatest quality is your worst quality, Tracey, because you have integrity and you will stand up for what is right. And if you feel someone is trying to either do something wrong to me or to another person, you will say no, and you will stand up for that person. Yep. And yes, I got the ultimate, right? But I have no regrets. No. But I think that's why we have to change how people perceive bullying, and we have to try and in some ways enable our employees to take back their power and stand up as a united force against the bully. They used to do it back in the 1800s and everything, right? I mean, that sense of camaraderie and the ultimate in being a team. But I know it's difficult because, again, if you're in an organization where they don't support you higher up, and it doesn't matter that even if the 10 of you stood tall with Joe, and they didn't do anything to that bully, which was exactly like me. I mean, it's hard, and I think that's why with bullying, we've almost got to do a top-down effect, where there has to be liability and accountability for the employer or the organizations.
But we have that in New Zealand. We have very good laws about bullying, as do Australia, but they're not implemented and they're not acted on.
Right, and that was going to be my next point, because I know there's lots of people, especially in the States, that have said to me, but every school has an anti-bullying policy. I said every school can have one, but unless they implement it, and every single person in that school or in that workplace is educated on it and understands what is appropriate and not appropriate, and what will happen if things are not followed, and what is the follow-up, and everyone is consistent, because you have to be consistent. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to let it go for Joe today, but Dave did the same thing tomorrow and I'm going to go for him. Then everything's out the window again, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a whole shift that we have to do, because again, we know, right? If you kill someone, it's against the law, it's murder, but everyone does it, but people still do it, right? And that's a harsh example, but it's with bullying, we have, workplaces they either have to be fined, like in the States now in schools, they're actually losing funding. If they have an anti-bullying policy and it's implemented, but they don't act on it, they will lose funding.
Right. It's interesting because in the workplace in the States, they're well behind that. So there is no legal cover for bullying in the States at all.
But with schools, more so now. In fact, I did a post on it. Oh gosh, I think it was last week on Title IX, the act in the USA specific to schools, and how lawyers are now using Title IX to deal with bullying in schools, where even though they say, yes, we dealt with the bully, but they didn't, right? Because daddy was a rich lawyer and mummy was a doctor, and he's the head of the captain of the football team, and so we're going to let it slide. Now, under that title, lots of the states, and I think 3 have definitely enacted it very rigidly. They have very strict laws. I think lots of them are starting to follow on with Kansas especially has very tough laws that they've implemented, because there was a spate of suicides, about 7 suicides in the space of 3 weeks with teenage boys, and it was all related to specific instances of bullying. And so I think it's that with if we go back to the workplace, there's got to be accountability.
Yeah. Just this morning, there was a new post up from Stuff. Now, Stuff is one of our electronic kind of news media, national. They reported on a particular DHB, District Health Board, and they've released the results of some of the staff survey. Now, there's been all sorts of problems in this DHB. It's hitting the news for numerous reasons, bullying being one of them. And their staff survey has shown that 60% of staff have witnessed bullying in the last 12 months. And 32% have been bullied.
Yeah.
And
that's just one that's just one.
That's just one DHB. And they now have the evidence, and the claim is by some of the advocates over here in bullying that has been known right to the top, to the CEO for a long time, and she is still in post. And that is inexcusable. If you have 1 in 3 staff being bullied, there is a systemic cultural problem that will go right to the top.
And she is knowingly fostering it, encouraging
Absolutely.
it.
Well,
But
she covers for it. So the advocate that has taken on numerous cases within the DHB has 3 of which are suicide cases, and she covers for the bullies.
And you know what? This is what's so frustrating, because to me, and this is actually what they're now trying to do in some of the countries, is if you knowingly, if you were aware that there was bullying and you were in a capacity where you could deal with the bully and help the person, and you chose not to for whatever reason, and that person ended up killing themselves, they're now looking at actually charging not only the bully, but the person that was complicit in what the bully was doing. And it sounds hard, but I think that's the only way that you're actually going to get people to start sitting up and paying attention.
It's about proving it, isn't it? That's one of the difficulties. Because like you, I mean, your story and mine, I didn't realize, is so similar. It's not funny. It's interesting that we're both female. We're both in health. We were both very good at our jobs. We both had integrity and would speak up for right and morals and ethics.
And that's who
they pick on. It's not the weak that they pick on. It's the strong, capable people who could potentially expose their own weaknesses.
And yes, they feel threatened and intimidated by. And it's as I said, I mean, oh my goodness, when my book came out, so many people from this particular organization contacted me and said, I was two. And it was like, oh, we could have a little TV show, come on in.
Yeah.
And I can laugh about it now, but to me, it's absolutely appalling, because
it is absolutely shocking.
We're playing with what people are not understanding is we're playing with people's lives.
Yep.
It's their lives. It's their emotional brain health, and
it's more than that, because that emotional brain health affects the physical health,
and it affects
spiritual health, that affects the mental health, that affects the sexual health.
Absolutely, and the family unit. Because if you're, for example, a male and you're being bullied, that in itself is a huge issue, because it's still the male, right? The primary breadwinner, the caveman, I should be strong, I should be tough, I should deal with this. If it's a woman who's bullying the male, even more complicated, because there's the embarrassment and the shame, and who do I tell and who will believe me? And then if you're married and you have kids, you take that home with you. I don't care if you say, I don't tell them, in your body language, your responses, they can sense something is not right. You're going to withdraw, you're going to become depressed, you're going to start suffering like digestive problems, headaches, stress, not wanting to go to work, short-tempered.
Immunity, heart.
Right? Everything sets in motion. And so not only is the bully victimizing the person, but the bully is also victimizing the family.
Yeah.
It's another form of abuse.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. And
people need to wake up.
Yeah, and even as I sit here now, I'm like going, I would so love to name the people who did that to me. And yet even now, I would fear that if I did, they would jump on me from a high height and deny, tell lies. So in one of the formal grievances that I took, I was sat there with a support person. We had HR there. We had my new manager, because like you, I was moved, but unfortunately for them, the new manager saw what was going on and backed me 100% and ended up being bullied herself because she supported me. But the people that did it, they sat there, and before we started the meeting really, or, very early on, they kind of said, oh, well, just before we go into that, we need to talk about this complaint that's come in.
Oh, yes, and out of the blue, right? This sudden complaint.
Completely fabricated. So when I asked for the paperwork, it didn't exist. it was not a complaint. It was a disgruntled student who had failed an assignment, but they fabricate. And I've heard this over and over and over with different people in the same organization, that when they raise a complaint, they literally lie and fabricate that there is a counter complaint, rather than deal with what's being put on the table.
And that they did the exact same thing to me.
Common story.
So, and it was, I think what really hit me the most was the absolute lies. And we as they came out, we were able to disprove every single one.
Every single one.
So
one off.
One after the other. And then they went for the false allegations. These false allegations of all these things, and I'm like, that never even happened. I wasn't even working that day, and they knew that because they didn't press it after, but it was enough because they knew that they were just chipping away and breaking you piece by piece.
And that's all it was ever about, right? Was to try to break you and get you out.
And I mean, the irony was in that meeting, because I knew it was going to be bad, despite everyone else saying, no, you're going to come back to us. It's going to be great. And I'm like, oh, no, she's going for a pound of flesh. Yeah. And I had read a book by Carolyn Myss, and in it she said about standing in your own power, not giving them your power. And so I took a notebook in with a pen, and I'm sitting there, and I had written down in huge block capitals, do not give them your power.
Nice.
And it sat in front of me, and I'm a huge doodler. And when I get angry, my pen just goes round and round on a piece of paper. And so I was looking at it, and I just doodled around it. Don't give you power. Don't. And I didn't shout, scream, cry, nothing. And 1.5 hours later, I walked out. And the 2 union reps were crying and said in all their 15 years of doing it, they had never in their life been to a meeting like that. And they were crying, and I was still very calm. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to my desk and finish, because when they left the meeting, they were under the impression that I would be showing up for work on Monday morning. And at that point, I knew I could never work for her again.
Yeah.
But I was in a state of shock. So I finished my work. I closed the computer. And that's when I cried. That was when it hit me. And the finality of it all, because your future just falls apart in front of you.
Everything you've worked hard for years.
Right. There's nothing. And yes. And so that's why, I mean, I know bullying has been around forever, and sexual harassment, which is bullying, and, calling people dumb and stupid. Well, guess what? That's bullying. That's intimidation.
Yeah.
But it's now become so widespread and out of control that I'm scared that society is now almost saying, it's normal.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think in the workplace it is absolutely normalized.
Right. And they're trying to do that in schools, and I'm fighting back like crazy. And the worst messages and threats I get are actually from men.
Right.
Who threaten me about this. And all I can think of is, I bet you were bullied when you were in school. And it's wounds, you still got those wounds.
Triggering something.
They're triggering something. But if we allow society to normalize workplace bullying, we're done.
Yeah, absolutely right. So I could talk to you forever, because I think we have similar backgrounds. I think, we both have been through this. We both know what it feels like. We know just how destructive and devastating it is, which is why we've come out to do something about it. So yes. I can see why we resonated on the post and why we're talking. Before we go, what I'd love, 2 things really. First one, there will be people listening to this who are on the receiving end of this sort of behaviour. What would your best advice be for them? 1, to keep themselves safe, and 2, in terms of what can they do? Who can they go to? Where can they have a voice? Where can they be heard? what can they do? What would, having been through it, what would your advice be to them?
So if they're going through it, I think the first thing they need to do is, as hard as it is, you got to, it's never about you. It really is not. As horrible as it isn't about you. It is really about the bully. And it's difficult for you to even understand that when you're being made to feel like you're worthless. You need to tell someone. You absolutely need to tell someone. And so you have to have a confidant, whether or not that is someone that you trust at work or a union. I mean, if you're union reps, you've got to follow up with a union rep. That's a given. But many workplaces don't have union reps. And so if you don't have a hierarchy that you could go and report to, what I would encourage you to do first is document everything.
From your first suspicion that you might even be bullied.
Document. Keep your emails. Keep your voicemails. If they text you, then take a screenshot. Yeah. Print everything out.
And any corridor conversations, convert to an email and say, thank you for our conversation where we discussed X, Y, and Z. So it's all in writing.
And you put it back to them and you keep those. And I would encourage you that if you either print them off or find a way of sending them to your home computer. If you leave them on your work computer, things disappear.
Yeah.
So be very cognizant of that. Don't think I'll come in the weekend and print them off. I bet you anything they'll be gone. Yeah. So I urge you, document, and keep everything. You want to start completing a dossier to show a history. Never ever go to if they call you for a meeting or a talk, you take someone. You either wait for your union rep or you take a trusted person who is going to go in and be a witness and is going to record the meeting. And either take your phone in and say, you won't mind if I record this on my phone and get permission. If they say, no, you can't record it, then you refuse the meeting.
Yeah.
If they are not willing to have you record what they're going to say, then it's not going to be nice.
Yeah.
Try not to ever put yourself in a situation where you're one-on-one with them. If you are suddenly alone and they're coming towards you and you see there's a group of people, even if they're not known to you, try and get within that group of people, because anything that that person says will then be heard by the other people. And they rarely do that at that point, because earshot conversations can be used against them, especially if they don't know who those people are. But try never to be in a situation where you're on your own with the person. And if you're going for lunch, don't sit on your own. Try and go and make sure that you're sitting with other people, even if you don't know them, because if you're on your own, that's when they make a beeline for you. And I know it's almost like you feel like you're a secret agent or something and you're avoiding the bad guy, but that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to protect your own emotional health by not listening to what they have to say, but you're also needing to protect yourself. So even if they do come at you, there are other people that are going to witness it.
Yeah,
they're going to witness the body language, even if nothing was said and something was flung at you or you were poked in the shoulder, it's witnessed.
Yeah.
And you need to see a doctor. You absolutely need to see a doctor and say, this is what's going on, this is what I'm going through, because you need to have a record, because if the worst case scenario, something happens, you will have medical records which shows that you started to experience insomnia, headaches, digestive problems, high blood pressure, and you had reached out. So go and talk to your doctor, get a record. If your doctor suggests medications or counseling, take advantage. Time off. Take advantage of that, because at the end of the day, organizations will use you as the scapegoat. In the whole scheme of things, it's horrible to say you're collateral damage. I was collateral damage.
Yeah.
But you still have a life after that, and you still have to go on and find another job or fulfill family obligations, everything. You owe it to yourself. Do not allow one person to steal. I'm big on steal your identity and your power.
Yeah. So I echo all of that. I also think of what you said about, being taken off email lists and shut in an office. So it's also recording things that you were left out of that you would have previously been invited to. Where you weren't allowed to go.
Yes, they all went for a pub night. We always do it every Tuesday, and suddenly I wasn't invited. Oh, we left you off the email. No, they didn't. You were excluded, and that is bullying. And so it's everything that remember what was normal and what is now different.
Yeah.
And you have to record that, even if it's 3 friends that you were close to no longer want to give you the time of day, record that, because it shows the bully is indirectly ostracizing team members away from you, and that in itself is extreme bullying.
Yeah. The other thing I would add to that is probably the one thing that got me out of my rabbit hole, because I was surprised, one, how quickly I went into the rabbit hole despite the skills and strengths that I had.
Me too.
And then once I was in it, I felt completely helpless. I couldn't seem to find a way out for a while, and I got angry and frustrated, and then apathetic and withdrawn, and all of the classic,
all the emotions.
Right.
Yes.
But in the midst of it, I came across what I now do for my business, which is Embraining, which at a fundamental level teaches you how to manage your own autonomic nervous system. And that, for me, alongside gratitude, which you beautifully described earlier. So the combination of embraining, breathing, and gratitude was what helped me to stabilize and then begin to come out of the rabbit hole again. So I would highly recommend, seeing a doctor, but also if you book to see an MBIT master coach who is trained to work with the autonomic nervous system, that for me was literally a lifesaver, because without that I was well down that rabbit hole. I was having very dark thoughts of, can I go on? Can I continue? So that would be the other thing I would kind of just say to people, that there are skilled, qualified people who are not GPs necessarily, but other people who are qualified to help you with the physiology of that stress.
100%. And I mean, absolutely. My psychologist, because he doesn't, he's not a medication person to begin with. He strongly believes that, early childhood trauma and everything, and the changes that it does to your brain and how it affects you in later life, and the behavioral strategies and the holistic approach more than anything. And that's what I, throughout my book, in my self-care, that's what I kept saying to people, is that there is no, pills are not going to get you through this. They'll help at the beginning. If you're really, with me, I needed them because my dopamine was just so done. It helped me. But eventually you realize that when your brain chemicals are then stabilized, they're not the root cause of the depression. It's just all the neurons and everything's going on. Some of them may deplete. Is that keeping on with the medication and not doing anything else for yourself is not going to get you out of your hole.
No.
You have to start caring for yourself as a holistic person, mind, body, soul, spiritual, physical, you name it. And that's what, as I said, I say in the book, I say to everyone, the person I was when I went down the rabbit hole is not the person that came out of the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Not the same person. And I'm sure you can say the same thing. It changes you. But when you come out, you have a different understanding and appreciation of life. And you're different person, but I think you're a better person because you're more in tune with things and will utilize whatever resources you can.
Yeah, I think for me, there's like all this, when you change, it's a choice really. And some people will come out a better person with a drive to stop this happening. They'll be an advocate for other people. But I have seen people who come out really, really angry and just wanting a pound of flesh. And I think that's what's worrying me about some of the bullying movements is that what appears to be happening, and I actually said at a bullying conference last year, you've got to be really careful you don't become a bigger bully. And fighting bullying with fighting, while I totally understand the emotion that is driving that, I don't personally think is going to be the way forward that actually sees transformational change. So what I'm looking for is a way of doing it, again, because of my background in embraining. I want to find a way that does it compassionately and wisely, that is strong, absolutely strong, and yet comes with a greater wisdom and compassion, and remembering in the workplace, both the bully and the victim are employed. And so the employer has a responsibility for both of them.
Both. And I absolutely, I mean, there are two people involved, and I mean, especially with child bullying, when I say you have to see what's going on in the bully's life. There's a reason why a child bullies. As an adult, we can have a certain degree of compassion and understanding and offer them help. In many instances, the adult bully will accept help. In many other instances, if they're a narcissistic sociopath,
and there's a lot of those in the workplace.
There's a lot of that. Sorry, you're really not going to make any headway. But yes, I had to get to a point. You have to do forgiveness. You have to move forward. And I have seen, it ultimately comes down to personal choice, and you can choose to come out a better person angry and go and say guns blazing, and that's no good, because you're going to end back down your rabbit hole before you know it, because things will not go as you hope they will. Or you can come out with a different perspective, a different understanding. And as I said, I mean, my theme is, especially with the kids, it's engage, educate, empower. And I also throw in sprinkle kindness everywhere, because that's a quality and a value that the world has forgotten big time. But no, there is a way to do it from learned experience, but you have to do it, as you said, intelligently, with compassion and understanding, and in working with this. I mean, our workplace is diverse. There's religions, ages, gender, ethnicities. I mean, we have to be so cognizant of all of that and be able to change a work culture for the better, which still empowers every single person who comes into work that day and make them feel valued. I think at the end of the day, we all want to be valued, that we are fulfilling a purpose. And there's nothing worse than making you feel like you are not worth anything. I mean,
yeah, and I think that's why the isolation and exclusion is so damaging, because basically they're saying you don't even exist.
That's it. Exactly. And as I said, it's and we have to, because the more people step up and stand up and say, okay, we need to look at this, and how can we, so we've got a law in place, but it's not working. So how can we tweak it? And what can we do within the workplace that the employer feels, you know what, I can implement that in my workplace, and that can create change. Because everyone ultimately wants to have their own control of a situation, right? And so it's been we have to be mutually respectful as well. But if we don't do anything, then nothing will happen, and people will continue to end their life by suicide, or go home and abuse their wife or children because they are so broken down and stressed and don't know what else to do, because maybe they're not seeking help and they're so confused. And you know, when you're emotionally torn into bits and it's affecting your entire body, and you're so overwhelmed you can't even make sense out of anything, and you're blaming yourself because we're our own worst enemies.
Yep.
You should toughen up, you should be able to deal with that. You know, how can we expect them to go and be functioning members of society when they leave the workplace? Because life will not return to normal when they go home for Saturday, Sunday, weekend, because they're carrying, I got to go back to work on Monday, and here it goes again, and it never leaves them. So I say, you know, we have to stand up and support and protect each other. That's what humanity is supposed to be about.
And we, at the end of the day, it is getting back that sense of humanity
and
kindness,
community,
connection, community. Dare I say, love?
And that's, well, and I think Einstein, one of the letters he wrote to his daughter, said, despite everything that I've done, I can tell you what the secret formula is to a happy and fulfilled life. Love. And that's it. Love. That's it. He said it's that simple. It's love for yourself. It's love for one another. It's love for mankind. And I mean, New Zealand has just proven that. They came together for the mosque shootings, right? There was that connection of community. So people want that. They know they can do it. So why can't they do it to help?
Even within that, though, if you've watched the news this week, I'm a Christian, and it breaks my heart that someone under the label of being Christian would stand outside as a church unit and basically outside that same mosque just this week declaring that Christchurch is a Christian city.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So
no.
even within where we've seen people coming together and showing love, we
still have that ostracizing of other religions. And I mean,
shocking.
I think, and it's shocking, and our sad reality is we're always going to meet those people.
Yeah, and they're going to be in the workplace and in schools and in communities. And it's why I try to now dedicate my time to upskilling individuals that when they find themselves in that position, that they, like you said earlier, it's not about them. They can bring that peace and love to a place, even when it is a really difficult environment that they find themselves in.
I agree. It's sometimes, if, you know, we can try, but I always say, if I can, as I said, engage, educate, empower each person to take back control of their life and learn the coping skills and develop that sense of self-worth and confidence, they will come out of it the better person.
Yeah, beautiful.
And that's what we need to start doing as a society, is let's start empowering our kids 100%, because they're facing stuff that we never faced as children. And it's a hard world, but let's all start empowering one another. Because everyone has a story. I've gone through the gamut, you've gone through the gamut, but I can walk outside on the street, and if I went up to every single person, I bet you every single one of them, except for the narcissistic sociopath, will say, well, let me tell you about my life.
Yeah.
Everyone has a history and a story, and it involves pain and heartbreak and emotional torture. And, you know, we need to be kinder and start being more accepting and not even tolerant. No. It's understanding with respect and have a little bit of class and integrity. Beautiful. You know?
Tracey, that's a beautiful place to leave this. I know that you do amazing work in what you do. If people want to get in touch with you, where can they link with you? Where can they find you? And just tell them the title of your book so they can go and get hold of that and have a read more about your story.
So the book is Escaping the Rabbit Hole, My Journey Through Depression, and all the links actually are on the website. My website is www.traceymaxfield.com, and there's also how to get hold of me. There's loads of articles on there, information about me, the book, what I'm doing. And it actually, on Wednesday, my website won a silver medal for the ELIT Book Awards.
Oh, fantastic.
As Best Author Website. Which is what I set out to do. I didn't want it to be just about me and my book. I wanted it to be as a resource so people could go there, because I got all the suicide hotline numbers and mental health resources and bullying. I wanted them to go there and read articles and get information of what they can do to help themselves or help their kids. And so, yeah, when I saw that, I was like, wow.
Well
that made
done.
me happy. That was what I set out to do. So that was good.
That's fantastic news. Thank you. And thank you for everything you do. And obviously, I'm Suzanne Henwood. My website is Embraining for Success. If I can help you, please do, as Tracey said, talk to someone. No, it's not about you. And you can get out of that rabbit hole. There will be people there if you just find those right people to support you through it. Keep on going. You be the better person, because you are so worth it. Thank you for listening to us having a chat about bullying.